Start me up. Wednesday, Venturi, Dakich. God bless us all. How are you, boss?
Oh, man, I'm good. It's great. I needed a couple days before Wednesday here. That Sunday was just exciting. I mean, we not only got 8 quarters, we got 8 quarters plus 2 overtimes. It was.
Do you want to see the overtime rule changed?
No, I don't.
Me neither.
I really like the overtime rule. I'm not a big fan of the college rule. I don't like putting the ball on the 25 and then playing 2 more hours. I always have liked the sudden death element. You know, I was 13 years old when Unitas won the first game, which is probably the greatest game in history regarding television, because that was the first time I think a national audience won a world championship in '59, and Unitas led a 2-minute drive to tie it. And that was the first sudden death game ever played, and it meant so much to pro football. So there's a part of me that likes sudden death, but I didn't like necessarily the idea that you could win the toss, make 2 first downs, and with a great field goal kicker, the game's over. I didn't like that part of it. So I thought the league came up with, a really good idea. And that was to give you the possession. But if you can go down and score 7, game's over. So if you don't, then it goes back the other way and you play it. And then they put a limit this year on the 10 minutes. Although we would have kept going there. Yeah. But no, I really like the rule. And both games turned out differently. Both of them had different results. With both of them in overtime. And really, if you can't stop them, if you kick off to them and they drive the length of the field and you can't stop them all the way to the end zone, that's really your problem. And that was Kansas City's problem. On the other side of it, the Saints won the toss, got the ball. Rams forced a tremendous play by Fowler, to hit Brees and knock that ball up into a pop fly. And so, you look at it both ways, but I really like it. I think it really is a good situation. I don't want to see it. I don't want to see that one changed.
You have said on this show, going back a couple of years, I remember before the Colts were getting ready to play the Rams in the opener 2 years ago. You have said that Sean McVay's a savant. You've used that word. Why?
Okay, first of all, this is a kid. And he and Belichick, even though one of them is hitting his 70s and one of them is 32 years old, but they have tremendously similar qualities. And I know both of them. I know both of them different ways, but I know them well. Both of them are tremendously brilliant people. I mean, they're very, very smart people. Both of them grew up at the dinner table every night in football families. Bill's dad was a longtime assistant at Navy. He grew up in that family, nothing but football, played catch with Staubach and Joe Bellino and those guys as a kid. Sean grew up, with his grandfather, the very famous John McVay, who was the head coach of the Giants, but more importantly was the longtime GM of the 49ers in their great run. He and Bill Walsh worked hand in hand together. So, those kids, those guys grew up in the game. I got to know Sean actually in 2009. We had been let go at St. Louis after 2008. John Gruden had been let go in Tampa after 2008. And John called me and asked me what I was going to do. And I said, well, I'm just going to sit on my tail for a year and try to recover from all this and see what I wanted to do. So he said, I want you to come over every day. We're going to put together an organization called the FFCA, which at that time was Fired Florida Coaches Association. We're going to bring my brother in, Jay, who, they had just the Arena League had just gone defunct. So he was the head coach of the Predators. So he brought his staff in. They were there every day. The Arena League team was there from the Tampa Bay Storm. So we had staff meetings, just like we put it together. And the young guy, a young runner for us, and it was John had given him his first job with the Tampa Bay Bucks as a low-level assistant, was a young kid named Sean McVay. And I would see him every morning, and John would say, "Sean, get me this tape. We want to look at this tape." And I always remember clinicking up in front of that room, and there was that guy with those eyeballs in that front row. I mean, this was a guy that absorbed football. And then he went with Jay Gruden. See, the background is Gruden/Shanahan. So he goes with Jay Gruden to the the United Football League, the Florida Tuskers. And, that was a couple years, and he became like a tight end coach or something. Then he went with Jay to Washington, when Jay became the offensive coordinator, and then he became like the quarterback coach. And then when Jay Gruden got the head job of the Washington Redskins, then Sean became the offensive coordinator of the Redskins. And in the meantime, he comes to connect with Mike Shanahan, and that's where – if you look at his X and O's, which I love, this is my part of the game, he is a combination John Gruden, Mike Shanahan when it comes to X's and O's, in that he maintains that zone running game that was so popular by Shanahan. And if you look at the boot passes, where they get Goff out on the corner, like they used to, like Shanahan used to get all those guys out on the corner. And then there's a West Coast element to, the quick release stuff, the bunches and stacks that he really learned from Gruden. The other thing I really am impressed with him is it takes a lot, as you know, Dan, because you've been the guy who hired and the guy who was hired. It's very difficult for a young guy at 31 years old or 30, whenever he got that job, to have the self-assurance and personal confidence to turn right around and hire a defensive coordinator who's 70 years old, who's a bigger name than him in the league, who's had 3 previous head coaching jobs. And I talked to my buddies at the Rams. I thought maybe that was a made marriage by the front office, and they all assured me that definitely was Sean McVay's pick. And that combination has just been tremendous here in 2 years. I mean, what they've done is that was a franchise that was just distraught. I mean, it was bad. They had 15 minutes of fame, in the 2000s with The Greatest Show on Turf, and the rest of it was just god-awful. And so really and truly what they've done is amazing. The savant part of it is just brilliance, X and O brilliance. I think he has he's a guy that brings – I don't know if charisma is the right word. What he brings to a room is energy. He comes in with those bright eyes, and he's on the attack. I mean, I saw him in that game, and trust me, TV can't even do justice to the noise level when you're the opponent in that place. I mean, I coached there 10 years. I absolutely loved it because in that first quarter on defense, especially if you were blitzing, it was just almost impossible for the offense. But I thought he stayed the course even when things weren't going good. He had the cojones to make, the call, down 13-0 on his own 30 to make that huge call, which I thought psychologically was a great lift for him. But I thought more importantly was his steadiness for a young guy. You could just see it in his eyes, the body control with Goff. I just felt like there was a symbiosis there, and he just kept going. So, I feel, and I'm kind of going off, but, I mean, what the hell are we doing today? So,
right.
I feel terrible for the city of New Orleans. I know those people, it's bigger than a game for them. It's their life. It's an impoverished city that lives and dies with football. Nobody has a lot, but you can't get a seat at Baton Rouge on Saturday night. You can't get a seat in the Mercedes Dome on Sunday because football is their life. And, it was stripped away in that sense. But I will say this is after the call, the Rams outplayed them. The Rams outplayed them in that last minute to go down and get that field goal, and then their defense outplayed them in the overtime. And I really came away tremendously impressed with the Rams because I don't think people gave them the chance. Maybe with Belichick, you kind of expect that he's going to go in and make a good game out of it. But the Rams going into that venue, I was really impressed the way I guess the best way, and I think I said to you during the game, is that they just never gave in. They were on the ropes many times, but they never gave in.
Coach, we'll come back. We're going to continue the conversation on the Rams, but also what the Colts need to do. And, of course, your guy, Belichick, back in it 9 times, man. I can't wait to hear what you guys say about that. We'll be back with the coach. All right, Coach. Yeah, boy. Bill Belichick goes to another Super Bowl. But, and I must say this, I want to talk Chiefs for just a second. Number one, Dee Ford goes offsides, which is coach. And then they fire Bob Sutton, the defense coordinator. Coaching's a mother, Coach. It's
you know,
a
and Bob and I are close friends, as you know.
Yeah.
And he had maybe one of the better games of his life the week before against us, one of the better plans, one of the better execution games. But it's ridiculous. I'm not sure that I have ever seen 2, I will call them bonehead plays, one by officials, one by Dee Ford, that really not only affected and changed the outcome of the game, but in many respects it changes the perception of history.
Yes.
If first of all, if Ford doesn't line up offsides, which is really inexcusable. I don't even want to hear Andy Reid talk about the official should warn him. You just don't line up offsides. But if they make that if that doesn't happen, then the Chiefs win the game. Bob Sutton's the hero because they just had 3 interceptions on Tom Brady, and we're talking about the Patriot dynasty being dead. Instead, you know, it's the 2 drives by Brady that are incredible, and Belichick and the legends live on. The legends only grow. But that is a play that was a total bonehead play that in many respects changes history. Same thing can be said of the Saints situation. We would be talking about Brees versus Brady this week and, you know, Sean Payton and all that, and we're not. And again, 2 bonehead plays. And I feel bad for Bob, but basically in modern day, not so much when I started in the 80s, but as the years have gone into the 2000s with the you know, just the scrutiny, the 7 days a week. You and I are guilty and we know what we're talking about, but we can make or break you by what we say and, you know, what our narrative is. In our case, we know what we're talking about. In many cases, they don't know what they're talking about. You know, and so I think as an assistant coach in modern times, I think when you take your job, when you raise your hand, you almost know that you can be a sacrificial lamb at any time. And somebody had to go, and the coach is always going to go before the players. And at the end of the day, you can't argue that you gave up 526 yards. You know, the Patriots kept the ball for 43 minutes. Bill knew the best way to beat Mahomes was to give him 17 minutes with the ball. That's it. And that's a little bit of Earl Cleveland. A little bit of Earl Cleveland philosophy came into that game. And they're a little bit more 50-50 now with the ball control and 50-50 with the open triangle offense. It used to be 75-25 because I think he knows his defense can't play 9 innings. It's become more of a 50-50 and a little bit more emphasis on ball control with Sony Michel. But, yeah, it was a very, very difficult situation for the Chiefs. You know, at the end of the day, you know, they certainly have a chance. But, you know, in the end, you have to stop them. You had 2 chances to stop them. And I think, you know, Jerry Kramer wrote one of the definition books on Vince Lombardi, you know, in the great 50s and 60s run. And I have to tell the young people that's who the trophy's named after.
Right.
But, you know, the great drive you would remember in the Ice Bowl against Dallas, the famous quarterback sneak by Bart Starr, so forth and so on, was done basically with the second unit. Mercine was in there, Donnie Anderson, no Horning, no Taylor, and they go the length of the field under terrible conditions and score at the end. And Jerry Kramer said that drive right there defined Vince Lombardi and what the toughness, the discipline, all his style meant to that team. And I'm not sure, and there's been so many, and you may have even seen more than me because I wasn't around here for the duels with them, Manning and him, but I do know this, that those 2 drives at the end of the game and in the overtime, converting 5 third downs, 3 of them 3rd and 10s, to do that under pressure with absolutely no margin for error on those 3rd downs, I think, defines that program. And I know he's not for everybody, and I know a lot of people don't like him, but you can't argue with now 8 straight, 9 Super Bowls and 8. It's just amazing what they have accomplished over the years. I talked about Sean McVay, and Belichick does 3 things. He knows how to construct a team. He's got bus drivers, and he gets passengers who are complementary pieces, but he has guys that can drive the bus. He nurtures it. His teams get better. By the end of the year, he has developed and he has, morphed or evolved with every single team is a little bit different. Like this one is a little bit different. And then he strategizes on Sunday, buddy. I mean, he strategizes on Sunday. I mean, at the end of the day, you didn't hear much from Kelsey. You didn't hear anything from, Tyreek Hill. And that's why his influence on me on that type of strategy is what sometimes will force me. I'm not as tolerant as most people with simplicity and, we're going to do it this way and win this way and play hard. Because I've been around, the greatest strategist of all time. So, I do appreciate that game. I thought if you want to bounce the other way, you have to give Wade Phillips a ton of credit in there. I mean, Michael Thomas comes out of there with 36 yards. Who would have thought at the end of the day that Tyreek Hill and Michael Thomas have 72 yards combined? And Sean Payton it was a chess match. He knew he couldn't get it to Thomas. He was beating him with Kamara, but in the fourth quarter, they used a Belichick tactic that Bill had used on Marshall Faulk in a Super Bowl back in the 2000s, and that was he knew the linebacker could no longer hang on to Kamara. He just couldn't play him. Littleton couldn't play him. And so what he started to do was bang him with the defensive end and sacrifice the rush as he came out so that even if he came out in the pattern, he would at least give Littleton a chance by knocking him off the route. And so, the chess match was absolutely great. Again, affected by a couple bonehead mistakes, but the NFL, then they shouldn't react to all this stuff, overreact to it. They will because they'll play the PR game. Don't overreact to it. Just do some smart things and go on. But I mean, it's again that Sunday has been kind of the culmination of, kind of a comeback season for the NFL. And I hope that the Super Bowl, which will be watched by everyone, is just as good a game.
Coach Venturi, we're going to come back with you. I want to kind of get into the matchup, if you don't mind, a little bit here. Let's just see what you think. But it was amazing to me. Tyreek Hill didn't do nothing. And he got honest to God.
Nothing.
And anybody that watched football knew he wasn't going to do nothing. We'll be back. Hey, a couple of things, Coach. Number one, Todd Gurley, he had a bad game. They took him out. Anderson went in. What do you make of that whole situation?
Well, what I make of it, and that was I didn't get into that when I was giving you that treatise on McVay, but I really respected him. I mean, it's one thing to sit down to even a kid like Mac who isn't totally established, but you're sitting down Gurley at you're putting yourself out there for. What I like about those guys, it's all about that moment. It ain't about the perception, and Gurley just wasn't into it. He's admitted it himself to his credit, and Sean just went with the other guy. He was going to have to bang away. He couldn't take Gurley's temperature at that moment, and now watch Gurley to come out and play with a passion in the Super Bowl. I look for him to come out and really go, really play, and I think that will affect Bill's thinking when he gets ready to throw this game plan together when you talk about matchups.
Coach, let me go also. Phillip Dorsett has made plays, Coach. Why? Just because he's with Brady?
Yeah, he it took him a while. He got in there late with them. They had guys in front of him. But just remember, Bill is one of those guys that he will take a kid like Dorsett, and he likes to do that. He's the opposite of the Rams. The Rams are big money free. They've got 11 critical guys that came in free agency, the Rams. Like somebody said the other day, if you're an NFL football player, you want to cheer for the Rams because they're exactly what you want teams to do. The Rams paid big money for 11 key players, and they were big names, and they didn't worry about their locker room with Sue and Fowler and Peters and Talib. They didn't worry about stuff like that. They brought them in to win. Belichick is a little bit different. He's got a lot of free agents, but he's a little bit more like Billy Beane in Moneyball in that he paid big money and he's got one ambient on defense, just one. I think Flowers is close, but he's got one, and that's Gilmore, the corner. So Gilmore becomes a big matchup guy for him depending on what he wants to do. But he does more. Bill will do more in getting undervalued players. Grigson got so much criticism for taking Dorsett. I liked Dorsett when he took him, and you can go back to the records.
You did.
I've always liked him. I thought that he needed time. He wasn't a guy that had a million reps. I thought if he would stay with him, he brought something to the game that you just cannot teach, and that is speed. I think he came into a situation where we expected too much too fast. But he is a role player there. He's not asked to do, he's not asked to come in and play the slot, but what he is out there so that when teams defense the open triangle, in other words, when they're in that spread, it's all about Edelman, Gronkowski, and White. And this year, it's been more about White and Edelman with Gronkowski almost as a specialist because he hasn't had the burst that he's had before. Now, what happens is when teams are smart and they start doubling. In other words, you go double. You have, and this is kind of old school ball. That's what you see from Wade Phillips and Belichick. They'll use what we call man-to-man derivatives. They think zone is concession. Zone to them is almost communistic. They're going to man-to-man you, but they're going to use different variations to do it. So the way teams play the Patriots that are smart, they play them in double-double, which means you double Edelman and you double White. It was always difficult, or you double Gronkowski and let White. You just mix it up, or you play a one rat where you take and you always have a guy one, or sometimes you rush three and you have two guys in the hole, so that all those crossing routes you have somebody there. That's what I would criticize my buddy Bob for trying to play that two-man with Edelman and not having somebody to help him on that stack, because they got in that stack and they could never stay with him on that press two-man. But anyway, so what guys like Dorsett are there for is to win on the outside. In other words, if we're going to pack it all in, all those coverages I'm talking about, doubles and one rats, all basically bracket off the inside of the field. Because if you look at Brady, that's where he wins. It's on the inside of the field. And so guys like Dorsett are brought in there. He was thought of as a bust, so he was able to absorb him on a rookie contract. He's done the same thing with several guys. Cordarrelle Patterson, the same way, kind of a bust at Minnesota. But he finds spots for those guys. I mean, when you watch Patterson play, Patterson now is an entity. You don't know if he's a running back, if he's a receiver. Dorsett is out there to use his speed to beat guys one-on-one, so that if they pack everything in, then he's got a guy like Dorsett to do it. I mean, even with Allen, we soured on Allen because he wasn't John Mackey, but he's one of the best edge blockers in the game. So he don't catch any balls because Bill knows he's in there to do what? He's in there to be the edge blocker. And when he and Gronkowski are in there together, now they have two of the best tight end blocking guys in the league. But he doesn't ask those guys to do one outs beyond. To me, that's the beauty of him, is his passing, his bus drivers. His bus drivers win the game, but those passengers have to win it if somebody schematically takes them away. And Dorsett finished up with 3 really good games. He's had 3 touchdowns in three games, 5 catches in the last 4 in the first playoff game. So he's a viable threat for them now.
I'm going to say I'm going to bet this too. I'm going to bet that Dwayne Allen, just because everybody thinks he doesn't catch anything, he's going to catch a touchdown pass in the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? It's like Mike Vrabel. It just seems like that's what's going to happen in this.
What happens is as I said, Bill has always run 2 offenses. Somebody had a great description of him, and I think it's one of the real strengths that he has when it comes to strategy. The reason you can't figure him out, and it was Louis Riddick, who I coached with the Browns, who You've had Lewis on before. I like Lewis a lot. He's very, very smart, and he's been in the front office. He played for me. He was a really tough, smart player. But, he defined Bill. We all worked or played for Bill. And he said he's like water. He doesn't form until you get the container. And that's exactly right. I mean, when you watch the Belichick plan against Kansas City, it may be totally different against the Rams. It'll certainly be subtly different. It may not be totally different, but it'll be subtly different. And the emphasis on the open triangle versus the hammer and shot offense will change based on what he thinks the Rams' vulnerability is personnel-wise and in effect scheme-wise. And so I think I've said this to you before, but the only guy I've ever been with that before we ever put an X and O down on Monday for the next game, we would meet maybe 3 to 4 hours on their personnel and our personnel and how it matched up and where the weaknesses are, and where the strengths of the system are. And so, you would devise that, and then he would simply say, okay, all right, these two guys don't beat us on offense. This scheme or these two guys don't beat us on defense. You guys got that? Do you understand that? And then he would say, and I don't want to have this discussion on Sunday, which was like the warning to us is when you go do this plan, these things must be done. And if they're not, you'll be gone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So and then, of course, he has his handprint on everything. Nothing goes through there offensively or defensively that he doesn't sign off on. And he was coaching it up Sunday. I mean, he threw that surface again, man. That surface, he's been hard on those. That surface. And I laugh because he uses, I think I mentioned it to you a couple weeks ago, he uses the old-fashioned Polaroids on the sidelines. He doesn't use the surface. He only used the surface because he wanted to show that official that his guy got picked on the touchdown to Terrell Williams, to Damian Williams, that it was definitely a pick. So he showed him the replay down there, and then he threw it about 100 miles. But, it's constructing a team. It's nurturing. He does a great job of finding it as it goes on. And then strategy, this will be, like I said, you don't need to like any of these people. You don't need to understand and really know the strategy of this game coming up a week from Sunday. But for me and, for what I treasure in life, let the chess match begin here.
What's going to be what is going to be Sean McVay's strategy? You got to take away Edelman, don't you? And you got to rush the passer, don't you? I mean, up the middle.
Yeah, you have two separate entities that you have to be ready for. He runs two really offenses, and now they're 50-50. And lately they've been like 75 open triangle, and then it's been 25% kind of that power package that we saw in the 2-14 game. And now he's emphasized that more, because his defense really is so-so. It really isn't great. It can't really play 9 innings. They can play about 7. And so he tries to reduce the game a little bit. And so in some ways you have two plans going in. You have to defense that power package, which is Sony Michel's package. And, they've been averaging 168 yards a game rushing. I don't think people believe that, but that's what they've been averaging the last 4 games. And Michel, has been well over 100 every week. And so what you have to defend there is you've got to load the box, and then you got to double Edelman so that he doesn't get that deep ball, because what he does there is he's hammering at you, but as you get everybody up there, then he'll put Edelman on what we call a deep read route where he can run the post. And if the post is closed, as we say, he can stop at 20 and find the hole. It's a deep read with maximum play action. So, you got to be ready for there, but what you can't let him do now is run it. And I know that sounds crazy because I've never always felt that way, but you can't let them run it because that makes them so much better. And then in the open triangle, I think what you got to do is two things. You have to pack it in. You can't let them beat you with Edelman inside. And, and then what you don't want to have is you don't want to have a bad matchup if, first of all, pack the inside, because that helps you on White, it helps you on Gronkowski, and it helps you on Edelman. If you think you're going to play them straight man with no help, they're going to rub, they're going to bunch, they're going to get in there. They proved it to Kansas City. But what you don't want also, the other thing you got to be alert for, where you need a little nuance in your man-to-man, is if Gronkowski is by himself on the weak side at X, or if White is on the weak side by himself. If they get a linebacker or a stiff safety out there, that game is over.
It's interesting. Like, you know, when you look at McVay, okay, and you mentioned that he's a savant, all right, what will he I mean, he has to match this, and just so you explain to people, what you start out doing isn't what you're going to do maybe as quickly as 5 minutes into the game when you read something else happening.
Great point. Great point. You have to be nimble. You have to have flexibility, because you're not when Sean goes into this game, he's not guaranteed to how Belichick is going to play him. Now, here's with my background with Bill, here's how I think he plays him. Okay, I think first of all, he shuts down that zone running game because he knows Gurley, and he's not going to say that Gurley. He's going to look at Gurley for what he is in Anderson, and he's going to load the box on those early downs. He is not going to let him that zone running game. He'll penetrate like hell. He'll drive through, and then he'll make a decision on Woods versus Cooks, and he knows Cooks really well since he's had him. And what I mean by that is the decision. If he decides to lean the free safety to one or the other, I believe it'll be Cooks because of the speed. So if he leans the free safety there, he'll take Jackson 27, who's the 2 corner, not the 1 corner, and he'll put him over there on Cooks with help from McCourty in the background. And then what he'll do is take his 1 corner, which is Gilmore, and he'll put him on Woods and stuff him. If you remember back to 214, this is similar. What he did to us is he played Reggie Wayne with his top guy. Yes. It wasn't Gilmore, but it was his top guy back then, and he played him. He didn't waste the 1 on the double. He put him on Reggie and stopped him, and then they put the safety lean with the 2 corner on and played Dorsett played Kilton high-low in that situation. So I see some of that coming back in. I think he stops the run. He doesn't let that get going, and then he plays with the matchup in the back end, and I think he'll take Gilmore to who he considers the 2 guy. So, you know, what Sean has to do, first of all, and Sean's really good at this, he'll get in bunches and stacks. So it's very hard to double guys within those situations. It's much harder with movement, stacks, bunches, crossing patterns, and that's what he'll start doing. He'll start going to those crossing patterns and things like that. He'll anticipate that. And then, you know, particularly if Woods is the guy that's singled and you're doubling someplace else, then you got to get it to Higbee. You got to get it to those tight ends, you know, and then you got to figure out who's going to cover Gurley, because what people don't realize is when Gurley was really rolling, you know, he not only has a ton of yards. I mean, he's got 1,366 at the end of the season, 5 rushing. But Gurley also has 61 catches. So he can be a very effective receiver. So it's just like Sean Payton. It was the chess match for me. When he realized that Michael Thomas was going to get doubled by Wade, it was a true double. It was true doubles. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't like play a zone and hope you get him. It was a double. Then that's where, and I said to you during the game, you got to win with Kamara, and he did it until the very last part of the fourth quarter when Wade started using that defensive end to stop Kamara. But I mean, you're exactly right, Dan. This is brilliant guys here in this game. There's no amateurs in this one.
No, and I got to switch gears. Colts lose, bad game. Now you move to the offseason. What type of player or players are you targeting? And let me go through it just a second. Big money free agent, maybe just another kind of fill-in free agent, or build through the draft, or all 3. What are you doing?
Well, I think the first thing, the first question, the first thing you have to do, and I know you're familiar with this because you come out of this kind of thinking, is you can't bask in the sunlight. The fans can. It was a great year, right, and the future's bright. You can't bask in it. You have to really, really critically analyze your team harder than you've ever done in your life. And I think the first thing you do is evaluate yourself, and you say, is Glowinski a bus driver? Is he a passenger? And you do that with every guy on your team. And then what you start to look for, is there a better bus driver out there? Can you find somebody, within your salary scheme, within your thing that, and because you'd like to get impact guys. What you'd like to do to take the next step is you'd like to get that guy who can who can make the difference, who can change the game on defense. Let's say an edge rusher, for lack of an argument. Okay, let's say another big-time wide receiver. Now, here's the problem on that. I've already been through those early names, and you look at the free agents. Okay, here's 3 key free agents that are rush guys, because that's what we really need. We need an edge guy that ruins the game by himself. So you got Lawrence from the Cowboys, Ford, and Clowney. Those are 3 guys I think that everybody in the league considers ambient players, guys that you must scheme. Then you have guys like Clark, Flowers, Ansa, Zadarius Smith. I can go on and on. There's several guys, but let's just say those first 3. Well, do you think Lawrence is really? They're going to let him out of there with 14.5 sacks, Ford with 13, Clowney at 24.5 years old and can play anywhere along the line of scrimmage. So what happens is, as much as you would like to say, I've got plenty of money and I'm going to go out and get me a rush, a tremendous edge guy, he may not be there. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's not wrong also if you can get a better passenger. In other words, if you can get a better guy, if you can get a better role player, and I think Chris is really good at this in terms of financial value. He caps him just like Belichick caps him. In other words, he puts a value on a guy, and he's not going to go a dollar ahead. And I think that's smart. I don't have any problems with that at all. In fact, I believe in it. So it's not as easy. But now in the draft, it looks like, and I've only got a surface knowledge of this. If you talk to me in another month and a half, I'll have a deep knowledge of this because I'm just starting on this right now. But there are some rush guys in the draft. Now, what Chris is going to find out, and he knows this, but he's going to find out that he's going to have now the same issues that Bill Polian had, that Ryan Grigson had after year 1. He's no longer going to draft in that lottery. Now you're sitting down there in that bottom third of the draft, and it's a hell of a lot different than when you're picking 6th or 3rd in every round. It's a lot different. If you look at Grigson's first draft, it was a great draft. He coming off of a 2 and 14. You look at Ballard's draft last year, it's historically good. There's no question about it. But it gets tougher now. And so you really have to make the good decisions, because sometimes when you're sitting there 26th, that edge rusher's not there. The guys that go the quickest in the draft are edge rushers, great offensive left tackles, and quarterbacks. I mean, that's what's really become. Now also, and this is interesting because the other position that I think we all agree that we would love to have, if we could just pick and choose, if there was no salary caps, no issues, the other thing you would like to do is get a premier receiver to go with T.Y. Hilton. There isn't any doubt about that. You'd like to go get that guy, put him out there, and maybe that press coverage wouldn't be as good against us, or they couldn't double Hilton because now we got another guy that can actually stun you. But when you look at the free agent charts, you look at the top 25 in the draft so far, that wide receiver is not there. He is not there. So, you may be able to get a little bit better, and I'm all for that. I think you can get better in big ways like the Rams did. You can get better incrementally like Bill Belichick does, and you can make it a day. But my point is, it's not as easy. But if I had my druthers, I would love to come up with a big-time edge rusher. If for some reason they get down on Ford after this play, which I don't think they will. I think they fired Bob Sutton, and that'll make everybody happy, all the fan base happy, and Ford will be forgiven. Then that's certainly a guy you got to look at. So, and I know everybody is against different things, but, you do, and I know Chris will do this. And all I ask is that you keep an open mind on everybody in the league, and you work through every problem, and you see if it could possibly fit. And that's where you look at if you really want a top receiver, and you're willing to do almost anything, if you were the Rams, you would look at a trade for Antonio Brown. You would look for Antonio Brown. You would possibly look for a trade for Beckham Jr. Now, I'm not saying you do that, because if you do that, you're immediately talking about a $20 million cap. Okay, so you're paying really big money, and I do worry on your top investment picks. Is your top investment picks, you're stuck. If you pay big money or you draft a guy first, you've got to hit on him because you're stuck with him for a long time. But I mean, when you really get down to it, there just isn't always. It's not always. What's that say in the mirror? Objects are closer than they appear. And so it's really interesting. You can have big eyes, but sometimes the stomach can't handle all that. So that's why I think you do. Like I said to you last week, everybody thinks you can get all front row guys, but I'll tell you what, there's only a handful of really guys who change the game, and so you just have to keep a really open mind. You can't make just principles and say, well, we'll never do this or never do that. No, you keep an open mind. Doesn't mean you have to do anything. You can just get a little bit better everywhere, get schematically better. But, to me, it's edge rushers and shut down corners on defense. I mean, that's what it really comes down to, is edge rushers and shut down corners. Because I'm going to tell you one thing. You can like the defensive progress, but if you are not able to play man-to-man derivatives, you're never going to get to the mountaintop. I'm just telling you. You just look at Sunday. You just look at this. Eventually, you have to shut people down.
Go ahead.
No. And then, offensively, it just look, again, I use those games. I'm not going to belabor it, but those games that we really struggled offensively were against teams that got in our face, that gave us big-time press coverage. We're able to come with 4 and 5. We're able to mismatch our right side of our offensive line, even though I know everybody's saying it's great and, we're making folk heroes out of guys. But when I looked at that Kansas City, that right side was struggling all day long. So, again, look at the great teams that you played that shut you down. And, basically you've got to come up with ways, both sides, and some of it's schematic, and then you've got to have the personnel to do some other things.
You're the best, my friend. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you.
All right, Dan. Have a good one, man.
You too, my friend. That's the great Rick Venturi. That's a hell of a breakdown right there. 4 Winds Lakeside in Marina, presented by the District Tap. 60 beers on tap and damn good food. I love them both.